they're trying to give us minimum wage. The president is now pitching minimum wage. But minimum wage, what is that? How does minimum wage work? If minimum wage worked, it would create jobs, but it doesn't. It destroys jobs. Minimum wage destroys jobs. The higher the minimum wage goes, the more jobs you destroy. But remember, that's okay with them because you have this giant safety net and they don't want people to work anyway. So let's put the minimum wage. Why don't we put the minimum wage up to $40 an hour? Now, where does the minimum wage actually come from? What's the history of the minimum wage? Oh, you're going to love. Come on, say it with me. Who was the one who started? Come on, what administration? Come on, you know. But do you know why they started the minimum wage?
They very clearly had an idea to get rid of the lower classes. In a sort of eugenics sort of way, get rid of people who are inferior.
Okay, you mean by bringing them into the upper class, by giving them more money?
No. What I mean is they would price them out of the labor market so they couldn't have jobs, so over time they would
eat and they would die.
Mm-hmm. I want to show you. Jeez. I want to show you, and we'll show you who said this, and it will boggle your mind, because it's the same kind of people right now.
Yeah.
I want you to listen carefully. This is the beginning of minimum wage. This is their philosophy of minimum wage.
It is much better to enact a minimum wage law, even if it deprives these unfortunates of work.
Stop. Just there. Just there. It is better. For instance, healthcare. They know that healthcare, they knew the whole time, you're not going to be able to keep your health care. You're not going to be able to do these things. They knew it would cause the country to lose jobs. 2.5 million is the latest. But they knew that in advance. The paperwork is all there. So read that first sentence again on the minimum wage. They are already willing, and they have demonstrated that they still believe this.
It is much better to enact a minimum wage law, even if it deprives these unfortunates of work.
Okay. They also knew that this would not work for the lowest class. They knew that this would not work. Things have gotten worse. If you have real serious problems, it's gotten worse for you. And don't take my word for it. Take it for the people who are depending on medicine, depending on life-saving insurance the way it used to be. Now we'll go on. Minimum wage.
Better that the state should support the inefficient wholly and prevent the multiplication of the breed.
Stop.
Jeez.
It is better for the state to control what do they call undesirables?
Here they call them the inefficient.
The inefficient. Mm-hmm. So better for the state to support wholly. So in other words, housing, everything, support them wholly so they could control them. Now I want you to remember the word inefficient. Do you have the George Bernard Shaw? Mm-hmm. The inefficient. Listen to this. It's better for us to support wholly the inefficient so we can stop the breeding. Mm-hmm. In other words, we will have control over these people, and we will, because we can tell them exactly what they have to do, we'll snuff them out.
Yeah, we'll keep this generation alive. We'll make sure there's not a new generation so we never have to deal with them
again. We don't have to deal with them again. Okay, so listen, this is from the same era. Here's George Bernard Shaw.
You must all know half a dozen people at least who are no use in this world, who are more trouble than they are worth. Just put them there and say, sir or madam, now will you be kind enough to justify your existence?
I want you to know. I want you to know this is the beginning, literally the beginning of the Nazi Holocaust. This is the beginning of genocide, and it started in the West. It didn't start in Germany. It started with Germans, quite honestly, coming over here to America and invading our universities and totally making us godless and Marxist and everything else. But it was the Holocaust. What happened? That was a Western idea. And again, you just heard George Bernard Shaw say, we have to know half a dozen people yourself that you say that they don't do it. We can't use our society to support you.
They're totally worthless.
Right. Read that last line before you go on to the next one. Read that last line again about the inefficient.
Better that the state should support the inefficient wholly and prevent the multiplication of the breed.
Got it? Of the breed.
Rather do that than subsidize incompetence and unthrift, enabling them to bring forth more of their kind.
Man.
And should we give away who this is?
Yeah, who is this?
The Princeton economist. His name.
Sorry.
A Princeton economist.
Princeton economist. So this isn't some crazy man.
No.
This is not some crazy man. This is a Princeton economist.
And he was so non-crazy, he was able to elevate himself all the way to the U.S. Commissioner of Labor under Woodrow Wilson.
The Commissioner of Labor.
And how many times did you talk about the Fabian Society? Same thing. Sidney Webb is an English economist. He co-founded the Fabian Society. He talked about the minimum wage. He wanted to have a minimum wage so we could make it above the value of the unemployables, as he called them. And he said, of all ways of dealing with these unfortunate parasites, the most ruinous to the community is to allow them to unrestrainedly compete as wage earners.
Okay, so what happens? What happens with the minimum wage? There are some people that there are some jobs, let's say it that way, not people. There are some jobs that are only worth a certain amount of money. Now, if your company says, it's not worth paying somebody $15 an hour to come here and lick stamps, it's just not worth it. So what does that mean? A, it means your life becomes more miserable. You have to spend more time because the company has to now dump all that work on you because they can no longer afford to have somebody do that task at that price. Now, if the company says, okay, well, just going to have to outsource it, then they outsource it to somebody who they will pay much, much less in Mexico or in India. So that job is gone. So what happens to the people who are not worth paying $20 an hour because they don't have the skills? But they can have a job. They can have an entry-level job. And maybe they develop the skills and maybe they impress somebody and their life gets better. You know what? Carmen is a great example. Entry level, right? She was being abused.
She works here, yeah.
Yeah, she's the one who cleaned my fishbowl with all of the artwork from Orson Welles.
She scrubbed it really well.
She scrubbed it all clean. But anyway,
got that baby clean.
So here's somebody who could barely speak English. She's being abused by the system. But I watch her and I see how good she's doing. She's well taken care of. She's handsomely compensated now. Not because, because she's good. Yeah. She's a hard-working woman. Her and her husband, they deserve it. They're great. They are great.
Yeah.
Now,
they're here.
That's the way it's supposed to work.
Yeah. It's true. And you see these people that don't get the jobs because they raised the minimum wage so high, they're now dependent on the government and are now long-term Democratic voters till the end of time. And the other part of this, which I think is just as bad, because I've kind of had this disconnect my whole life with minimum wage of like, okay, they want to do it as a good political issue, but why do they care? Why do unions support it so much? Listen to this. This is from the United Food and Commercial Workers Union. Oftentimes, union contracts are triggered to implement wage hikes in the case of minimum wage increases. Such increases are one of the many advantages of being a union member. A hike in the minimum wage is not just a hike in the minimum wage. It's a hike in the union wage. And that's one of the reasons that they never talk about and why the Democrats love this so much. They're pumping tons of dues and eventually campaign cash into their own campaigns by raising the minimum wage. It hikes up the union wages.
All right. There's the truth, and history repeats itself, and we're going to complete the cycling.